Welcome to Couch Coop's top 10 best looking PlayStation 5 games. It is April the 19th, 2022. I always like to think about people watching this in the future, PlayStation 8 owners. Could you remember when we're all on 60 frames per second? Can you stay on topic, please? A few games didn't make it onto this list. This is not an actual entry. Dirt 5 gets a mention because of its flawless split screen and utilisation of that PlayStation 5 power. And that brings us on very nicely to our first entry. Borderlands 3 from Gearbox comes in at a solid number 10 for my top best looking PlayStation 5 games. Number of reasons for this. It does utilise the split screen and the power of that machine very well, just like the aforementioned Dirt 5. It's the only split screen game you're going to see on this list, but it's one player and its fidelity modes and its performance modes, everything's very clear. There's a beautiful peg 60 frames per second, and when the combat kicks off, nothing affects the game's performance, and it is one of the most colourful and busier games on this list. It's an absolute marvel this when it's going full whack. One of the stipulations for entries on this list is actual PlayStation 5 versions of the game. So stuff like God of War that's had a patch that gives the PlayStation 4 version a boost, it doesn't have that actual white logo, it doesn't sit on your SSD, it's not in the collection, if you know what I'm talking about. These games must be, and there's a few that miss the peg. Nier 2's got a brilliant upgraded free system, and there's a few that didn't make it in, like Ghost of Tsushima's director's cut that sits at like nearly full price to actually access that PlayStation 5 content. Massive marks get scored for a free upgrade edition of the game. Back to Borderlands 3, and it kind of went through quite a big journey with its development and the next-gen system. What we got was just like a boosted edition, and they didn't add a vertical split, as I go on about till the end of time, and then we got this free PlayStation 5 upgrade. The vertical split was implemented. It gobsmacked me how much improvement I saw on the game and how much trickled down into having it as a couch co-op game. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands also missed the mark. I much prefer this with its wealth of future sci-fi aspects and its huge arsenal of different weaponry, combined with some very crazy NPCs with the language and the gore all turned up to 11. It's an incredible starter if you are looking into getting some relatively free upgrades for your PlayStation 5 games.
Well tracked, beast.
As far as tech goes and certain things used to amplify or increase the graphical fidelity of this game, there are no major steps forward. Things like ray tracing, volumetric light, there's none of that. Because it's a cel-shaded interpretation, it's kind of got an advantage and disadvantage in that aspect. This was a bit of a dilemma for me. Am I going for realism, or do I go for games that are just stunning on an artistic level? The latter is kind of subjective, so I'm trying to reach the middle ground here with new tech and cool looking artistic games. Borderlands 3 being one of them. Number 9 is GTA 5, particularly the PlayStation 5 version. Now, I've got to do a little bit of humble pie eating here because I kind of slated this for its cost and its implementation, meaning I didn't see the value in it. But after looking at it under a massive microscope for a number of days now, I am kind of taken aback by some of the minor details that get put in with the addition of the PlayStation 5 game. First up, I want to talk about its different performance modes. There's 3, which is very important. It's the first game on this list that offers 3 different graphical and performance modes. One of them being Performance RT, meaning that the ray tracing and 60 frames per second are put in. It's just a mediocre amount of ray tracing, and some of the other additions that you would have seen on the fidelity mode have sort of been ironed out a bit. It's a little bit like almost having your sliders on a PC game, which is the way forward for console consoles, I think. But anyway, it's totally awesome. It's like the middle ground. It sort of cherry picks the best things from either modes, and I've always complained about that. It's kind of all or nothing with console. You either get 60 frames per second and start seeing granular stuff in the center of your screen because you're watching it on a 4K TV at 1080, or you have all the fidelity options up and it all runs at 30 frames per second. I think they've got CDPR in for some of the map stuff here.
It's just a robbery, sweetheart.
I think anybody who's very used to looking at this game on a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 4 Pro will immediately see what they've done here. The nighttime and the neons and some of the volumetric headlights with implemented shadows on pedestrians and furniture within the map change things up massively. It's crazy seeing your own shadow cast onto things. It doesn't give me incentive to replay the game, it gives me incentive to look at it all again. Maybe I will go through that single player campaign, but why the hell did they just not inject, I don't know, just 20 minutes of extra story content on each character, and everyone would have leapt into that story mode. Of course, it's all about the online now because they've been pumping so much into that over the last 5 years, and that brings me over to HDR and HDR implementation and YouTube's craziness and uneven uploading system. The whites bleed out crazy on this scene for some reason, and my flying is top notch. Your sliders might need looking at when you put the HDR on. This is not like it looks in the game, it's just the sky bleaches out crazy. The other thing is the new smoke and fire effects, which I didn't talk about much in the update video. They're pretty awesome as well, and seeing that depth on that smoke against how bad the fire used to look on stuff in the previous version of the game. One thing to remember is that Rockstar used their own engine, and it's a very famous one in the industry. It's one of the first to produce a proper decent open world engine. So my mind just boggles and boggles about what the new 6 is going to bring us, and there has been no leaks on this either. God, have they kept this quiet. Exciting stuff. It's now time for a Capcom game. We've got one on here, and it is of course Resident Evil 8 The Village, and we are surprised here everywhere with how realistic this Resident Evil game looks. It's kind of photorealism they've gone for, and it's one of the reasons why it's not as far back as it could have been put on this list. Metro Redux also could have gone in this. Redux's upgrades and ray tracing didn't really bowl me over, but this did. When I fired this up on my PlayStation 5 on its week of release, I kind of looked at that machine in a whole new light, no pun, because this was ray tracing 4K in areas. That's something we need to talk about. The options in this game are ray tracing on or off, meaning I think if it's off, you might be looking at full 4K and then some super sampling and 1080 when you've got all that lighting and textures material kicked in. And does it work well on ray tracing mode? My god, it's one of the most atmospheric games I own. I'm big on horror and Resident Evil, but that by the by, if this wasn't even within the franchise, it's a stunning piece of work with the way the maps are laid out and how that whole village works, almost open world like. Absolutely stunning stuff with architecture crumbling, all kinds of macabre things lying around. Even the wildlife has had some work put into it, but having these mountains around you all the time, going into some of those caves and looking at all this beautiful light and dealing with some of these crazy ass monsters is a real pleasure on the PlayStation 5. That lighting in particular is best worked within the interiors and sections that are closed in on the map, and the game really knows that well and takes advantage of some of the dankest, darkest, scariest, creepiest, creakiest corridors you've ever ventured into. This tops the VR version of Resident Evil 7 for me when it comes to those atmospherics and just crazy bosses, eerie enemies and locations that I'll remember for a very long time, and the graphics have really helped with that experience. Notice here we have some reflections in the blood on the ground. I know this is really gross. You can't see his movement in the ground. There are games that you will see that level of reflection on coming up. I was a little bit gobsmacked at that, but let's not hold it against it. Doom Eternal could have been in this slot, so I haven't taken this choice lightly. And of course, that was a ray tracing update that was just a reflections update. Ray tracing is currently the industry buzzword and has a tendency to get slapped onto things or upsold to a lot of techniques that really could just be billed as something a bit less glamorous. But back to what we're looking at, incredible game, incredible atmosphere, really cool options. I will never take the ray tracing off because I don't have any frame dips when it comes to that fidelity mode, and that's another very important point. This video has uploaded at 60 frames per second, and you will see some games struggle to reach that peg. Resident Evil 8 is not one of those games, and this scene is interesting. Try and keep your eyes on the windows. You've got the most amazing view, like crisp, perfect, motion blur doesn't even touch it. Some of this stuff you only notice during your replays. So let's leave Resident Evil 8 alone for a bit. I will just moan quickly about that mercenary mode being locked behind the entire game. Oh yes, it's time for Kenna Bridge of Spirits. What a breath of fresh air, quite literally going from zombie macabre murder to one of the most beautiful, even Tibetan influenced, amazingly colourful Zelda-like semi-open world games available on the system. Came out last year, loads more attention needs to be put onto Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Not releasing at full price and kind of coming out of nowhere, with the studio being relatively new to the industry, but it shone so well and it came out with such a surprise attached to it, and that being that visually it's one of the more unique games I've seen for a very long time, but at the same time it also ticks a lot of nostalgia boxes for homages and tributes paid to various games that we've seen in the last 20-30 years. The next surprise came in the form of its combat and how fluid it feels and natural, and how it competes directly with some of the best third-person ARPGs out there on the market. I was just so taken aback. I'll put the review in the description, but one thing to note, 2 modes available here, and there's a 4K, true 4K, no super sampling, but it will chug. It is a 30 frames per second, but I don't think they put the strictest of caps on it. So I switch over to the performance mode, which is what all this footage is, and the game is smooth as butter the whole time. Not having that 4K mode on permanently is not a massive hit. As you can tell, this game has a adorable art style, vibrant, very clean, crisp, excellent animations on everything. The guys that put it together have a wealth of experience in sort of coming up with cool ideas and characters. I love the Ghibli vibe with the little helpers. How you can jazz them up with funny hats and they help you out with puzzles, and I think that's also key, is that this is one of the few games on the list that is available to that entire spectrum of the family. There's no massive amount of gore in it. The combat is damn difficult and it's probably not something the younger ones are going to gravitate to, but watching it and listening to it, it does feel like high production Netflix CGI cartoon in places, and those cutscenes are absolutely flawless. I may have put it a little bit higher than it should be. It is a game that reminds me of Okami. It's got a tiny bit of Platinum vibe almost, with some of the combat and the roll and dodge, some of the slowdown, the specials you get on your stick, and how you can power up your helpers to really start supporting you in combat. Incredible game. Should be bought and loved by anybody who's got a PlayStation 5. Okay, it's time for Elden Ring. We're at number 6. There's a little couple of stories behind these pieces of footage. When I go in to extract said video from the games, I always allow myself a certain amount of time to sort of bugger around, and again, it just sloped into 3 or 4 hours, man. I was sucked into a boss fight, found something that I hadn't seen before and thought, I've just got to do this. But I ended up walking away with 20 minutes plus footage. All of the other games, I walked away with, like, let's say 10, maybe 15 at the max, 25 minutes of just stuff. You can't help but click the share button all the time, and that's a very good sign. However, it is one of the games that does have performance issues in its performance mode, which sounds as strange as it is, but basically when you're going on the supposed peg 60 frames per second, you are still seeing huge dips in certain areas of the maps. It doesn't ruin anything at all, and as I am speaking, a smaller patch has just dropped in. I very much doubt that's performance related, and I have covered its most recent patch, which did actually scrub up some of the performance scenarios. But let's get back to what Elden Ring is, and it's an expert lesson in world building. And of course, the artists and the guys that work at From had this instantly recognizable style with everything. The enemy design, even the way they move, the layouts, the maps, the landscapes. The details that have gone into every square corner of the game, and it's kind of instantly recognizable. From's games, especially the ones from the Dark Souls series, have become sort of almost this mad artistic genre in itself, with combining medieval European lore with crazy Japanese yokai, but imaginative enemy design, and then the weapons are also spliced with some of the folklore. It's absolutely amazing, and it offers this sort of crossroads of cultures. They just come together so well with all of From's recent games. I just hope they continue with it. They're just like Rembrandt's or Picasso's or anything else. You see a From game, you instantly know they've made it. There's an article knocking around at the moment which is a story of their journey, which is 30 years long, and you might know about some of their early Armored Core games, but these guys had their nose to the grindstone for at least 20 years before anybody recognised Demon's Souls, which incidentally isn't on this list. And let's address that really quickly. There's only 2 PlayStation 5 actual exclusives on this list. I didn't want to take that third slot up with a remake, so I've allowed other games in there. I will get to Demon's Souls, I know about its greatness, but for the time being, can we just wallow in Elden Ring's glory? From a technical prowess, it's got no ray tracing in it. Those reflections on that water, it's not massively next-gen, but that does not mean that this isn't beauty, and it does run fantastically when it needs to. Those dips are not going to be an issue with this game. It's going to get polished and a hell of a lot better. I can see it being even better looking in the next couple of months. I've got to get that Rotten Stray upgraded. My god, he's useless. He's an absolute embarrassment compared to the wolves. There is something I wanted to show you guys which completely freaked me out and made me just step back a few paces and realise how scary a game this actually is. So this guy's guarding like some ruins. He's not that scary, and he went down pretty quick, to be fair, but there was a lot of skeletons in and around the area, and there's a staircase that's underneath him, and I foolishly headed straight down those stairs. I'm talking to the lady and I'm like, I can feel something, and look at how good that is on the staircase in the corner. But then it gets to its limit of wonder and goes back up those stairs again. But man, that's pure coincidence, but From put the variables in to create that situation, and that deserves a nod. This is a pan of performance This is what we're looking at now, and then I switch it out to 4K, and it's kind of there to say that the differences in fidelity when it comes to distance and actual detail on in-game objects is not that much of a miss when you put it onto the performance mode to get those 60 frames per second brackets pegged. We are looking at No Man's Sky, yes, and this game did come out in 2016 and it has just pipped Elden Ring on a visual level. Please don't touch that unsubscribe button, hear me out. This video is called Best Looking Games, and let's do the classic graph with good game up one axis and good looks on a bottom axis. We're going for that sweet spot, and No Man's Sky has got some next level visuals in it now, with volumetric, crazy modes allowing uncapped frame rates and some beautiful fidelity, and it's really taken on board some big tasks on procedural generation, loading. The color palette is like no other game that you'll own. It's still stunning me with even the most normal mundane planets on these new updates and new content. This is the Outlaws' most recent update, which doesn't come with a huge amount of graphical changes. Those have all been pumped in over the last couple of years, but they are all coming to fruition now. It has been a bit of an evolution for Hello Games, I imagine. Their previous titles were not of this magnitude. What this game promised and then came out with and then has struggled to get back to that original promise has been one hell of a thing to watch. And now with all its bells and whistles and things that it's strapped on and tacked on, and the mounting of aliens and the fighting of pirates and all the freighter mechanics, it's a bit mind-boggling. It's a survival game now that stretches out so far on a multiplayer level that you can waste 400 hours into this and you wouldn't even get anywhere. My god, I lined those 5 planets up beautifully. For someone who enjoys capture and variety and environment and having a camera that's extremely workable, and that's something that I want to address now also, you'll see a suspicious ranking of in-game cameras that coincides with where I've put a lot of these titles. If your game has got a terrible camera in it, then I'm not going to be able to show my audience how amazing it looks. But this camera is absolutely top notch, allowing you to unhook and change the day and time. Wow, that works so well when you just want to sunset immediately, a click of the button and everything is switched out. The updates have changed so much with everything from a ground level on this game. A great example is this, well, the cape for a start, but this third person view and those plants separating when you walked around. That was not a thing a couple of years ago. These buildings looking like this with that amount of variety, and even those colours, that draw distance, the mist, textures, it's barely recognisable. What is recognisable is our friend Returnal, the first true PlayStation exclusive, and a game that doesn't run in 4K, which I have struggled with over the months that it's been out. It does, however, completely make up for this fact by running at the most pegged 60 frames per second I've ever seen in a video game. The amount of lights, camera and action that is going on when this game is kicking out full pelt is unbelievable. And this is my first stick in the mud for bring back PlayStation 5 exclusives. Returnal was a damn jewel in the crown for that lineup, and Housemarque must be devastated. They've missed out on sales for 114 million systems. By the grace of God, they put a photo mode in, not too recently now, and getting my head around it has been a joy because the game is very difficult to look at when you're playing it. Nothing is allowed near anything, and if you take your eye off one bullet for 1 second, it's all over. So it's nice to be able to pause, nice to be able to have a look at things, and of course they added that pausing of the run. This is a roguelike, meaning you couldn't walk away from this game for hours. Even if you were doing a good run, didn't matter if your kids were crying, you basically had to get to that boss. On a tech level, along with its frame range, this game boasts some amazing lighting with volumetric and mist, and of course dissipation on objects getting hit or exploding. A lot of the in-game furniture can be broken, and when it all gets smacked by your sword and pieces go everywhere, you kind of open your gob, because it's the first time our systems have sort of seen this level of interaction with both enemy and in-game furniture. It is ridiculously difficult, and I did have some teething problems with it for 6 months, but it's got an online co-op mode put in, which means that you'll meet some amazing random high-ranking Smurf account and he'll just take you through the whole game. You'll see everything and then you can just walk away from it. No, that's not funny. What you can do is get them, a bit like Dark Souls, you get them in when you feel you may be stuck. I do not go to this game on a compulsory co-op front. The whole joy of it is the fact that you are on your own in this nasty alien universe that's so desperate to have you killed. There are rumours that this is coming to PC. The guys at Digital Foundry were talking about some sort of press leak, some list of exclusives from both systems that are going to make it over to PC release. Well, what that means is that it might get pushed to a true 4K on a rig that will really push what this game is capable of. But for now, we will have to make do with the best looking roguelike AAA PlayStation 5 exclusive in the world, and it's just gone full 2-player co-op online, meaning that everything is kind of where it should be with Returnal at the moment. Very much doubt we'll see a demake on any other systems. Let's keep our fingers crossed on what happens on that PC front. And of course, Housemarque have been very quiet for a while, and I want to see a new IP from them. I think we might be couch co-op again. I know a few people that would have put this game square bang at the top, and it is a bit naughty of me having it this far down, but the games that are coming up I feel deserve it. Returnal gets mentioned on the channel all the time, so have a look at the links, get some more of it. Cyberpunk is up next, and of course I don't need to go back into this game and grab footage because I've got like 18 gigabyte of capture on this game. I'm completely obsessed with wandering around the map and grabbing the assets, looking at every damn thing going on. It's got so much better with the PlayStation 5 updates that we've seen improving and fixing a lot of the quests in the game, but when it comes to cool media running off the back of what this game looks like, there's just nothing better than using its camera mode. It's so good. It's completely free. Depth of field can be turned on and off. You can get rid of your character, and all of these game models, vehicles and assets had one hell of a lot of time spent on them by the looks of it. It was just a shame it kind of all fell apart when it got put together on launch. Because I spent so much time picking apart the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Pro version of this game, watching that PlayStation 5 boost kick in just on the base model of the machines, and then the official rollout of the PlayStation 5 version, I was not expecting the jump. I'd seen people on PC talking about it, and I was waiting for the console version or the free upgrade that they were talking about. They delayed it loads. I seem to remember it was supposed to be May, and then it got put back and back. But when it kicked in, and when I saw Night City, how it was supposed to be seen on launch through the next-gen systems, the vision was real to me. I completely understood what they were trying to do, and they're still trying to do it. I'm so gutted about talk of the Red Engine probably getting knocked on the head, and this being one of the last games that use it. And that also reminds me that this generation of games are probably the last big name titles that may use Unreal Engine 4 and a lot of the other what are now considered previous gen engines, because we've seen the Unreal 5 footage and it is going to change a lot of things. Cyberpunk comes with two graphics modes, one being performance and one being ray traced, switched on, 30 frames per second, which does and doesn't gel with me too well. The performance is kind of the default for everybody, but with this and the way that it looks like at night, I cannot help but migrate to that ray tracing switched on. I kind of don't mind that 30 frames per second just to see this game looking as stunning as it is. However, all of this footage and the majority of footage on this video will be performance mode on all of these games. 60 frames per second is easier thing to manage than getting everything on a 4K level in a singular video for YouTube. Trust me on that one. The game of Cyberpunk 2077 of itself is also a bit of a mammoth task. If you really think about it, what did they discuss in that boardroom? They must have said, we need like the best open world game ever combined with the best first person shooting mechanics on Earth, combined with like all the best cars, best lighting, best graphics. I mean, they kind of asked the Earth. I think they did that because they must have been so confident coming out of the gate with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and looked at those numbers and thought, we can do anything. And look what happened. But clawing their way back up to that ivory tower very steadily is the new Cyberpunk updates, pushing this game closer to that promised land.
How bad is it?
Core blimey governor, yes, I have a few things to say about Ratchet and Clank's Rifts Apart from Insomniac. And you know what, I just keep thinking that those guys are like entombed, they're trapped within inside the vaults in Sony's like studio. They're never gonna be allowed to leave, and it's like they're an island. And when you go to Insomniac Island and play their Ratchet and Clank games, you are well aware of why they are some of the industry's leading third-person ARPG producers. Absolutely amazing stuff, this. So the beginning is like this ridiculous tour de force of what this game's going to do to you. I mean, it's like Wonderful 101. This is platinum level of craziness that goes on with changing the horizon and moving everything around and being on giant, colossal objects careering through time and space. This game is all about that. Have a little look, if you can, on some of the dissipation mechanics on that cover here. This is the first time I came across some major enemies, and I was just weeping with joy at how good it looked. This is the second game on this list, if you can remember, other than Grand Theft Auto 5, that has 3 options for the graphics, performance, and fidelity. And this is so cool because it's got a performance RT mode, ray tracing with a peaked performance. So we've got 60 frames and then a cherry picking of that cool stuff from the other side of the fence, and we get this amazing middle ground with it. This game loves to perform. It is non-stop. It's done stuff in front of me that I didn't think was possible this early on in the system's lifespan. That's a big one. This fight is kind of one of the first major flexes from the game's engine, and halfway through the fight you get teleported to a completely different biosphere and the fight carries on flawlessly. That's the SSD kicking in, and just the change of environment is so gobsmacking that I thought it was a cutscene you just would.
Oh, wow. Oh, no.
I am glad to see you have survived.
Notice the little alien dude behind him getting involved, and it's gone full No Man's Sky's pink grass, and it slows down when a weapon upgrades, and you get a real glimpse of some of its particle effects, and watching this on playback is just a damn joy. This game nearly went to number 1. So it will keep doing it to you. It keeps putting you into the game flawlessly through the cutscenes straight in to start, and it takes you a while to just realise that you've got control. It's like, are you kidding? That's me here? And well, that doesn't happen a lot anymore. It's been a long time since I've realised that a cutscene can be as good as in-game engine gameplay.
Let's get some phase cords repaired.
Just thinking it might have even been like Snake Eater or something, or even something earlier like Another World on the Amiga 500. And as you can see, I love a good pan, and every section of this game's got something going on in it. I was looking at those 2 guys over there in that alcove, and then this little robot goes over and gives them a menu. There's something going on everywhere. There's an amazing dance floor mechanic. I wasn't going to talk about that. There's right next to this is like a trial thing that's a bit like a roguelike. You can just keep trying at it. Really difficult wave system, and you'll open up so many weapons that you'll actually forget to have a good butchers at some of them. The drill bit, the way that's turning, some of these effects on ground and in air, and now it's getting nice and bullet helly, so it's difficult to not stand still for less than a nanosecond. All the enemies are pushing back more, the upgrades are getting pumped in, the weapon wheel has gone to a second one, so that's how many there are in game, and I cannot wait to finish it. Ratchet and Clank, damned industry leader. Yeah, that's it, Aloy. You pet your giant sentient metal yak with chainsaws. What could possibly go wrong there? We are looking at Horizon Forbidden Dawn of the West, and I am doing a very slow pan up. In performance mode, only 2 modes on this, and that's what I'm campaigning for, is the third, so that we've got some of that detail pushed into a locked 60 frames per second. This has a very true 4K fidelity mode, which is probably the best looking open world game on the market. I'd be impressed with an argument against that. It's certainly the best looking open world game on the PlayStation 5, and we just have a wealth of technology within the mechanics of all of this stuff we're looking at. If it's to do with the effects on machines themselves, some of the bloom lighting, it's got some incredible wind and dust mechanics on the ground and foliage flapping around when the wind picks up. Even the animations on her herself and fighting everything just feels so smooth at that locked 60 frames per second.
Gotta follow up all that action's working.
An absolute mammoth of work behind this game, a huge development time, and of course everybody was into the original Horizon Zero Dawn on the PlayStation 4. I personally think it put the system on the map, and it's still a game that's looked back on with awe with what it managed to achieve on a system that was really getting every single drop of power used. Is Horizon Forbidden West using every drop of power in the PlayStation 5? Well, I'll tell you this, you'll walk around some corners and the goddamn thing will hit you like a brick in the face. You'll be like, oh right, I own the best looking game in the world. It's dawned on me now, no pun intended. Every capturer's bane there, and that's the local wildlife in any video game. It's normally NPCs just photobombing everything you do, walking in front of camera at the final minute, but this guy just decided to whack me in the side of the face as I'm trying to look at the beautiful game. It had a big rework on a lot of its mechanics when it came to liquid reflections and the way that the water reacts to Aloy. That is all now on par with a lot of the other games that it competes with on the market. A lot of the other games don't have these giant mechanical beasts wandering around that are fully interactive with. You climb them, they help you work out Assassin's Creed style what's going on with the rest of the map. And talking of the rest of the map, it kind of offers quite a lot of more diversity within its biomes in the complete map of itself. The original game was quite desert and jungle focused, forest, sand, that was kind of it. With this you've got a lot of Arctic space. Yes, we did see that with Frozen Wilds, but in the form of DLC. Forbidden West has got like beautiful seas, turquoise oceans, but also like these crazy redwood European-like forests combined with that original sand and stone areas. It's a very broad scope of environments and they're incredible to see. This is one particular playthrough, and what you're seeing at the moment is me mixing up some elements to try and show how cool these frosts and acids look, but behind this dino is an actual scene that I'm going to walk into, and I'll say this now, I didn't choose that scene, it wasn't something I found, it's just anywhere that you walk, it's so difficult to find a piece of this game that isn't absolutely stunning, and that's why it's the top of the list. And that's why I've been Couch Coop. And that's why I'll see you down there.